Hello and welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be installing another stabilizer into a plane. This time it's going to be the A3-Pro from HobbyEagle. Now I ordered this along with its younger and older brother, or bigger and smaller brother I guess you'd call it, from Motion RC here in Europe. I'll put links in the description for them if you're interested in it. And I'm a big fan of stabilizers, particularly in FPV planes. I have the ZOHD Dart and a couple of the other ZOHD models that either have iNav or Vector or something else in it, but a lot of the ZOHD stuff actually comes with stabilizers straight out the box, have launch function, and it just makes the FPV experience so much more relaxing. You can just worry about making it back to the field before your battery runs out, rather than a gust of wind catching you and flipping the plane over and getting very interesting and exciting very quickly. Now we've looked at the A3L, which is the younger or smaller brother of this one here. Very simple stabilizer, and we popped it in a mini AR wing. And I've been flying that for a little while now, but to be honest, I'd like that ability to pop it into something called trainer mode, which is what these more expensive stabilizers have, and that gives you auto level, and it also limits the pitch and roll. So it's kind of like angle mode in a quadcopter, which is a very relaxing, easy mode to fly if you just want to fly FPV and just mooch about. So let me very quickly put up a slide to show you the differences between the different stabilizers. So this is the A3-Pro. So this is a 6-axis stabilizer, so it's a little bit more expensive than the A3L that we used last time. Has auto recovery mode and auto hover mode, and it also has a couple of extra little tricks up its sleeve as well. Because it's an awful lot cleverer than the A3L, there's a couple of extra steps to set up, and I'll go through that in this video. But if you go back and look at the slide, you'll see that the A3 Super 3 is essentially giving you all the same functionality, but it's slightly different. And if I actually take the A3 Super 3 out of the box, you'll see that there's an awful lot of cables and USB connections and all kinds of funky stuff, including a remote LED box that has the connection on for the USB, and that's the remote LED that you can also clearly see which mode it's in as well. Now I'll be doing another video in that in the future, but for now I want to put this A3-Pro into my AR wing so that I have that ability to pop it into what's called trainer mode on these things, so I can flick it into that and it'll self-level and it'll limit the pitch and roll that I can do. Maximum by default is 60 degrees, which is easily enough to get me in and out of trouble without flipping and rolling or doing acrobatics. But obviously at the flick of a switch I can do that as well. Now this gyroscope has exactly the same kind of features and functionality as the A3L, so if you haven't seen that one already, go and have a look at the video. I go through all of this in quite a bit of detail. It does have some really cute features, like it has remote gain on the transmitter, so you can set up a little rotary control so that you can decide how much gain you need. So if you're flying in very still weather, you might need it a bit lower. If you're flying in windy conditions, you might need to tweak that a little bit. If it's too high, you can see it in the FPV footage, and I'll show you that in a minute, where if it's too high you'll get a wiggle or a waggle in the FPV feed, or you'll be able to see it by line of sight as well. Just turn the gyro down, just turn the gain down on the radio until it's straight and level. So enough of this banging on, let me show you the steps that you need to go through to actually set this up in a model. Now the first thing I'd recommend is make sure that you've been and flown the plane already and you've trimmed it and it's flying normally in manual mode, and that you're very happy with where the CG needs to be and all of that goodness before you install a stabilizer. Next thing I'd recommend is set up the stabilizer on the bench. Now what we're going to have to do is go into something called the setup menu. To access the setup menu, you power the stabilizer and you press the menu button until the LED starts to flash. In there we can do things like set the wing type, the mount orientation, the flight modes we want, the gyro direction, which we'll do later when it's installed in the model, the maximum tilt angle, servo frequency and gain level. And what's happening here is the number of flashes of the white LED is showing you which of these it's talking about. It'll show me what the current setting of wing type is. Now this is going to be installed in a delta wing, so it has to be a green LED rather than the red. So I press it briefly once so the LED goes to the green, and then just wait a couple of seconds, it'll pulse and then go back and start round robining all of the settings again. In here, make sure you got your model set up, make sure you got your flight modes that you want selected. You can choose 3 in this model. In the more advanced A3 Super, you can have up to 6. I'm going to go for normal or gyro off. I'm probably going to go for something like trainer, and I'm probably going to go for something like attitude lock as well. Make sure that all the settings in here are right. The defaults shown in the manual and in the diagram here in the video were not the ones that I had for the flight mode, so just double check them. Also, while we're setting this up, we have it out of the model. Unfortunately, I forgot this step, which is why in this video here, it's actually in the model. Press and hold the menu button while you apply power. That'll take you into the receiver menu, and you can change the receiver type. By default, it's for PWM. You need to press it once and it'll take you into S-Bus. And that's most of the setup done, and we'll kind of do the tweaking when we get it installed into the model. Now, before we move on, I'd just do a couple of things. First of all is I would document the control positions for the ailerons or aileron, elevator and rudder, whatever you've got on your model, from the trimmed flight that you've just done, so that you want those back when you get to the other side. You want to remove any mixing that you've already got on the radio and configure the outputs as it appears in this image. Now, if you do it this way, you won't have to mess around with any of the settings on the gyroscope to remap inputs. So if you can, and you have the ability to, set it up like this with no mixing at all. The gyro will do all that depending on the model type you've selected, and also setting up a rotary gain control is handy because, again, we can change the remote gain settings on the fly, if you'll pardon the pun, when we're flying around. Now that's done, we can plug the servos and the receiver into the gyro itself. All you do is, if you already have them plugged into your receiver, unplug the servos for the control surfaces from the receiver and plug them into the corresponding outputs. There's outputs 1, 2 and 3 on this thing. You're going to use all 3 of them if you have a conventional plane or one with a V-tail. And again, all this is documented in the manual. Or if it's a flying wing like this, you're just going to plug the left aileron into output 1, the right aileron into output 2, and I'm going to plug the supplied capacitor that comes with this fantastic thing into output 3, and that's going to help protect me against voltage problems. I'm also going to plug in the S-Bus input from the S-Bus output of the receiver that I'm using, and that is all the wiring done. Now that all the wiring's done, I can just use the mode control on the radio and make sure that I can see the LEDs changing to show me what mode it's in, and make sure that corresponds to what I think I set before I plugged everything in. Now we've done all the wiring, the last thing to do is pop one of the anti-vibration pads that comes in the kit on the bottom of the thing and connect it firmly into the model. You don't want the gyro moving around at all, because that will cause all kinds of excitement when you come to fly. Now we've done that, the next job is to check that the gyro directions are correct. So power up the model, move the mode switch on your radio, you should see the LEDs moving around, pop it into something like attitude lock or trainer or auto level, turn the gain up as much as you can on the radio, and then rock the model from side to side. Now typically all the times I've used these things, one of the gyro directions is wrong. So the way to fix that is go back up into the setup menu, press the menu button until the LED flashes white, wait until the lights go to 4 white pulses, press it once, and then the blue flashes will come on, and then you can reverse the corrections that you need. Of course, my aileron and elevator were the wrong way round, so I'm just here changing them from a red LED to a green LED, and again, you just briefly press the button to change it, and then just leave it for a couple of moments. It will flash to let you know that's confirmed, and it will exit out. Once that's done, just double check again that everything's working okay, and we're set. You can go into the function menu, you press and hold the button until it's just a solid white, just a couple of seconds. You can position the servos into their middle position, and you can also use that function menu to also set the servo travel limit. I haven't done that here, I haven't had to, but that documentation is in the manual. You can just use the radio to go through and set them one by one. Final thing we need to do is to go into that function menu by pressing the button for 2 seconds until the solid white LED comes on, and then you want to do the level calibration. Wait until the LED flashes 3 times, and then with the nose slightly elevated and the wings level, then press it and the blue light will flash, and once it's finished it'll then go back into normal mode. Most flying wings and planes will need a slightly nose-up attitude to maintain their height. If when we come to the test flight that you find in self-level it's losing or gaining altitude at cruising throttle, then you can tweak this and come back and redo the calibration with either nose either slightly higher or lower than you've done it here. Now we've done that, then it's time to go to the field and to give it a test. So I've got 3 flight modes set up on this: a manual mode, a stabilized mode, standard stabilization like the A3L its younger brother was doing, and trainer mode as well. So a quick check of everything. I'm actually flying line of sight, but I'll record the FPV footage as well. So we're going to take off in manual mode, give it a ton of throttle and throw this wing straight in the air, and off it goes. And because all the control surfaces are trimmed and we tested this plane before we put the stabilizer in, there's no surprises here at all. It's useful to have manual mode to flick into if you get in trouble. So once I'm happy that that is all okay, then the next job is going to be to click it into stabilize. Now stabilize is going to give us that stability. It's going to reject any movement, uncommanded movement from the model by wind or anything. This morning is particularly still. It's a beautiful morning for the test flight, so I'm having no problems at all. Even moving the gain around on the radio isn't really changing anything too much or giving me any wiggles. Now that's done, next job then is to try the trainer mode. Now trainer mode is only going to give me a maximum deflection of 60 degrees because that's the default and I've left it as that, and I went immediately back to manual in this flight because it felt very, very loosely connected to the radio. But that's the way that this stabilizer seems to work. So back into stabilize, I'll do a little bit of flying around and then I'll pop it back into FPV in a moment. So the FPV mode almost seems to give a direct relationship between the position of the stick and the position of the craft from level flight up to the maximum deflection that you've got. So it's a slightly different experience, but once you get used to it, I found that it's very, very relaxing. Bringing the sticks back to the middle position levels everything off, and the other thing you're wanting to do here when you go into trainer mode is double check that the plane is flying straight and level. If at cruise throttle the nose is dropping, then you probably want to just rerun that level again on the bench like we did before, but put the nose up another couple of degrees. So in summary, let me give you a couple of tips for a successful installation. First of all is do always make sure that you test flying and trimming the plane before you install it. That way you're only troubleshooting any issues with the gyro, not with the overall build or setup of the model. Do make sure that you set up all of the things that you can on the bench. Make sure that you're familiar with how all the different menus work. This one is a bit complicated, having 3 different menus that you access by pressing the buttons in 3 different ways. So make sure you're familiar with that, because once it's in the model, it might be a little less easy than it was with this little cute AR wing to get in there and change things after the fact. Triple check the gyro. That is the biggest mistake that the pilots make, and what that causes is when you flick it into stabilized mode, the plane immediately starts a flip and roll of death and you're in big trouble. I'd always recommend, just like we've seen, have manual mode as one of the modes that you can have for the maiden flight. That way, if you do flick it into one of the stabilize or other modes where the gyro is actually doing something, then you can flick back into manual mode and rescue the craft. Don't forget that nose up attitude when you're calibrating level. Have it up a little bit and just double check in your maiden flight that you've got it more or less right. I find with FPV models they tend to be pretty good because they're set up so that when the camera is straight and level, the attitude of the wing is about right for cruising speed. Don't forget when you plug it in to leave the model for a couple of seconds just to initialize. The really cool thing with these stabilizers is it kind of wiggles the control surfaces to let you know it's happy and ready to go. But if you ever throw it and it doesn't feel like it's behaving properly, immediately land it in manual mode and just reset it and make sure that you don't move it when it initializes. And the last thing to think about is the fail-safe position of the model. Now the fail-safe position is something that you normally set all the control surfaces to neutral and the motor off. But of course this stabilizer will keep it nice and level. For me, I will probably put it into something like trainer mode with the motor off, and then hopefully the wing will try and maintain a level attitude, or recovery mode or something like that. But do think about that and make a conscious choice and program that into your radio before you fly. So hopefully that's been useful for those of you that have been looking at the A3-Pro. I will be looking at the A3 Super in a future video. The A3 Super can do everything that the A3-Pro can, but with a couple of notable exceptions. The first is that all the setup is done through a computer program, which makes it a little bit trickier to change things at the field, and it also is upgradable. Because it has a USB port, you can flash the firmware onto it, so as HobbyEagle add extra features or improve the functionality of the unit, you can update the firmware over a USB cable using a PC too. So keep your eyes out for that video, that'll be coming soon. Thanks for watching the video and watching right to the very end. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you like the video and like what I'm doing here, then hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification icon too. If you really like what I'm doing, you can go the extra mile and become one of my Patreons for access to me directly for support, and also giveaways and regular updates too. If you're looking for particular content, then check out the playlist. I organize all of my videos into playlists, so if you're looking for a particular topic, you can find everything here. If it's called Introduction To, it's designed to start very simply and build on that simple introduction to teach you all about it. If it's called For Beginners, then that is really aimed at people who are brand new to that part of the hobby. You can also search on YouTube for anything that you're interested in using the search function at the top. So iNav Painless 360 will find all of my videos and even the playlist around iNav. So thanks again for watching and happy flying.